So as always, I want to apologize in the event that there's a bunch of background noise coming in from the window AC unit. It's now August in Georgia. It's hot outside, so I apologize for that and the ceiling fan that's running above me. From the title of this video, you can imagine that I have made a pretty substantial change in my thought process as well as what I'm using on a daily basis. For months now, I've been pro RCS, doing everything I can to spread the word about what Google is trying to do in terms of their iMessage competitor. And it dawned on me maybe about a week and a half ago that why am I continuing to fight this fight for Google? Why didn't Google fight this fight a decade ago? A little more than a decade ago. Heck, you see on the screen right now, the title of this article we're going to briefly review is called A Decade and a Half of Instability, the History of Google Messaging Apps. So for about 15 years, 16 according to the article, which is actually 2 years old now, so 18 years, Google has been making things more difficult for the consumer. And in a second, we'll scroll down and briefly see a few things. But the whole premise is Google has not decided to adopt a messaging app or standard, however, a standard preferably, but adopt something and stick to it. They've started something and stopped, started something and stopped. Whereas Apple has said, you know what, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And they stuck with it. iMessage, I believe, has been around since the iPhone 4, and that's their primary means of communicating with other people on iOS and Mac OS and iPad OS devices. It just works. So let's briefly scroll down. And again, the title of this article is A Decade and a Half of Instability, the History of Google Messaging Apps. There have been so many of them. And I'm not going to read all that, but just looking at the table of contents right there, you can see how many there have been going back as far as 2005. And as I mentioned, this article was written in 2021. So quite a few in there. There's RCS, which I thought was kind of funny back in 2019 right here. They've said, Google and RCS. So we found this dusty old messaging standard in a closet. RCS is bad, and anyone who likes it should feel bad. I'm not going to pretend to understand the full complexity behind everything involving that protocol or that standard. But for me, a person who does enjoy using Android as their primary mobile device or the operating system on their primary mobile device, RCS could have been a ray of hope in terms of competing with what Apple has on their products. The other thing that I mentioned back here, that I'll point out right here, is Allo, which I do remember asking, I think only one, maybe two friends to download Allo. And it's like, well, if they have an iPhone, they talk to all their friends who have iPhones using the default messaging app. Allo was not designed to be a default messaging app. And even if it were on Android, that still wouldn't do anything for iOS users. So back then, Google was already making mistakes, and clearly we can see going back to 2005, things that they started and killed. They've been kind of doing this for a long time. So, and then, again, not going to click on everything, but right here it says a competitor emerges. iMessage has entered the chat. I may actually come back and read that later, but we all know in 2023 that iMessage has a really strong hold here in the United States, not so much around the world. Looking at this website called killedbygoogle.com, there's just a plethora of things. Not most of them not related to messaging apps, but a lot of things that Google has killed over the years. And I'll just briefly just scroll all the way down so you can see just how many things Google has killed over the years. And if you're interested, by all means, go to the website. But quite a few things that Google no longer supports. And it's called Google Graveyard, killed by Google. So, like at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that maybe about a week and a half ago, I came to the conclusion that, you know what, maybe I should switch over to iPhone. And, I wrote down a couple of notes, and I guess I'm trying to draw out what my thought process was over the course of the past, let's say, week and a half or 2 weeks. And the first thing that immediately came to mind was, okay, how am I communicating with other people? And now, of course, if I'm using an Android device, I'm just at that point using the standard messaging app, which is Android Messages or Google Messages or whatever it's called at this point. And for those who have Android devices and have RCS turned on, then that's great. For those who have Android devices and don't have RCS turned on, which a few people, you look like, hey, I know you have some type of Android device. Why aren't you using a messaging app that has RCS? They don't know what you're talking about, and just let it go. So that's RCS, SMS for some folks. For all of my iPhone friends, when I'm texting from my phone, that's SMS. Because I do have a Mac, and sometimes I want to send things that maybe are videos of some sort, I am able to send those through my Mac using iMessage to my friends who have Apple devices, friends and family. Then, which at some point I think I'm going to stop, I still have a few people I send messages to on a regular basis through WhatsApp, which, like at that point it's like, I think mainly it's really 2 people, and one of those people, she has an iPhone, so I let her know, hey, I have an iPhone now, so if you want to chat that way, we can. We're still using WhatsApp, so we'll see. And my other friend, she has a Galaxy, and it was nice talking to her through RCS or through WhatsApp. But as you can see, I was using a lot of different standards and apps to try to communicate with people. By switching over to an iPhone, that honestly has just made things simpler. Even though I don't want to admit it, it just has. Because, again, as all those people that I was already talking to using my Mac, boom, they were already covered. And now everybody who has an iPhone, boom, they're now covered through iMessage. And yeah, a lot of the communication is just text, but sometimes it's some type of multimedia. And even when it is just text, it's nice to know that the person actually received it. If I remember, which I probably won't, but if I do, I'll put up a couple of screenshots of people showing me screenshots saying that they didn't receive my message. Like they'll send something, and then I know I responded, but the next thing will be them sending me something else, and this is all through SMS. So I don't know what's going on with Android, with Google, with our carriers, with the iPhone. Who knows? Somebody does. I don't. But the problem was all of my messages were being sent, but they all were not being delivered, and that's a problem. With iMessage, you can see that your stuff has been delivered. I don't care about read receipts. I turn mine off, and I don't, for the most part, I think a lot of people have theirs turned off too, because you might take a look at it and decide to respond later, which is perfectly fine. But I just want to make sure that my stuff is delivered. And because the majority of the people that I talk to use an iPhone, I just want to, unfortunately, just not fit in with the crowd, because I could not care less, and I'll explain why in a moment. But I just want to make sure that you are getting my messages. That's really what it boils down to. I hinted at it previously just in terms of communicating, but as I mentioned, I use the Mac a lot, which I'm pointing at it right here because this is what I'm doing my recording on. And the iPhone integrates seamlessly with the Mac. iMessage, yeah, that was one thing. Every time that I get on a FaceTime call now or any type of video app, really video messaging app, it asks, hey, do you want to use continuity camera? Which, because this iPhone's camera isn't the greatest, I always say no, nor do I have a stand to prop the phone up to use the camera. But it's nice to see that I have the option of, well, if I don't want to use this camera right here, then I can use the camera of an iPhone and place it wherever I might want to place it. So the integration is seamless. One thing that I learned literally as I was setting up everything to record this video is when I'm using OBS, so Open Broadcast System, I believe what it's called, everything, record everything, it'll let me know that I can use the microphone on the iPhone. So I'm not talking to you through the microphone on the Mac. The reason I was adding a new mic is because I wanted to try out using the wired connection here. But one of the options was iPhone. I said, hey, let me give it a try. So I'm talking to you right now through the microphone on the iPhone, which I think is a slightly better microphone than the one that's in the Mac itself. Hopefully there's some type of processing that happens locally here on the phone and then it gets sent off. Is that really happening? I don't know. But it's just another perk of, unfortunately, being in the ecosystem. And this particular thing, yeah, I didn't even know until I was setting up everything right now to make this video. So seamless integration with a device that I thoroughly enjoy using, which this is the MacBook Pro, and I have a MacBook Air over there. I use that thing for almost everything. So yes, just seamless integration into the ecosystem is really what it's all about. I have to be clear, though, that I prefer Android, hands down. I think it is a way better operating system. But for the main reason of iMessage, I have adopted an iPhone. I still have my Galaxy right here. I also have my Zenfone 9 right here. Occasionally, my Pixel 2 even gets in the mix. So if I need to do anything on a phone, like while I'm out and about, I still carry one of those with me. And I'll say, oh, boom, let me pull out that phone, do what I need to do, put it away. If I am making phone calls or sending messages, I use this phone. Hopefully, I will put up a screenshot right now showing you what my home screen looks like. It is literally just a black screen and two apps, the phone app and the messaging app, because that's it. If I could uninstall just about everything else, I would, but you can't. And when I was using this iPhone 6 briefly, because I had this little guy laying around, I set it up where it was those two apps and then one folder full of the rest of the apps, which I, for the most part, didn't use. But with this new version of iOS that has the app library, everything's just off the screen in the little library for the things I can't delete. And I think there are a few other things that I have in there, maybe like a Maps app or something, of course the App Store and maybe a few other things. But for the most part, the only reason this phone is ever in my hands is because I am out and about, need to make a phone call, need to send a message. Heck, even when I'm at the house, I'll usually leave this phone up here in this room and I'll be around the house. And because that MacBook Air is so light and so portable, if I'm using it, clearly I receive all communication that comes to the phone also comes to the MacBook Air. So I'm able to see everything, respond to everything, even answer phone calls from it. So most of the time, this iPhone is not in my hands, not even on my person, only when I'm out and about. And apparently when I'm wanting to use the microphone to talk for this video, is this thing actually in my hand. Usually up here being charged. The MacBook Air does everything else. I'll carry it around the house, put it down wherever I am. I can type my messages, answer my phone calls, answer my FaceTime calls, of course, browse the web and do everything else that you would normally do with a full-blown computer. But that computer is also connected to my phone. You might be asking yourself, which iPhone did you decide to get? Because in preparation for the iPhone 15 and that USB-C port, which I'm really actually excited about, I said, you know what? Before I spend $800 on a phone, let me see if I can even stomach iOS. And truthfully, I still can't, which is why my home screen is the way that it is. But I said, I don't want to spend a lot of money right now. I need a trial period, which is why I started out with this iPhone 6 that I had laying around. And even though it technically got the job done, it's old and slow. So I said, well, let me get on eBay. Let me find something that isn't going to break the bank. And I landed on, and I wanted something that Apple was still supporting. So I believe with iOS 17, I think it's going to be the iPhone XS and later. So XS, XR, and later. Also, in terms of iPhone SEs, iPhone SE second generation and later. So I went ahead and got the second generation iPhone SE, which is what I'm holding right here. In total, I spent $85 for this, so $80 for the phone, $5 for tax. And then there's a blue case that I have on this guy, $4. I got the receipt over there, $4 from Walmart. It was on clearance. I was like looking in the little cage. First I picked out one. She was like, that's $6. I was like, yeah, it's not bad. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. What's that one? $4. I put it on while I was in the store to get a feel for it. Kept it on, and it's good. So in total, let's just around $90. $90 in total to get the iMessage experience. I don't want to say iOS experience because I could not care less about the rest of the operating system. I wanted the iMessage experience the portable iMessage experience. And in total, it cost me $95. So I think I've ranted long enough. Google really screwed up and has continued to screw up. They have really been pushing their Get the Message campaign. They are doing everything they can to try to get Apple to adopt RCS. And it's taken me some time, but I finally realized that it's not Apple's fault for not wanting to adopt something. It's Google's fault for not adopting something and sticking with it sooner. Google wants to blame Apple. Apple doesn't really seem to care too much. iPhone users blame Android users, but I was wrong. I am now blaming Google. Google should have sent the message a decade and a half ago.